Hello, and welcome to Radio NIGP. For the June episode, we continue our new and improved model that offers you a shorter episode format. Still packed with relevant information for any procurement practitioner, this month we continue from our start in the May episode, where we look at a fiscal year-end phenomenon so typical to government, when our clients look to quickly spend it or lose it.
Hello, my name is Barb Johnson, and I'm with RadioNIGP, and I have the distinct honor today to have a conversation with Mr. Rick Grimm, who is the CEO of NIGP, the Institute of Public Procurement. And as we know, the Institute just got a major accomplishment under their belt for their certification, the NIGP CPP. And so I wanted to find out from Mr. Grimm, what does this mean? And particularly for those NIGP members who either do have certification or are thinking about getting it. What does this mean?
Right. So, Barb, by the way, it's great to see you again. And thanks so much for what you and the Radio NIGP team do to provide information and communications to the membership and the broader community. I'd have to trace back to, what does it mean to the member? I want to trace back to basically a conversation that the NIGP board had in 2018. If we think about, that was before pandemic, by the way, and we didn't know one was coming in 2020. So it was like the question was, well, where should we be as an association, as a professional society, in helping members get better at what they do? And so one of the focuses was on building curriculum that actually took individuals through their journey. From the point in which they start right into public procurement. Now they need to know the basics of public procurement, but how do we nurture individuals throughout their career and constantly providing them not only educational resources, but ways in which to get recognized. And so from that was the whole integration of you learn and then you get recognized for what you learn through a credentialing system. And so part of that was, well, we know that what members could look for as an option, they could look for getting a certificate in RFPs or business strategy. Some people may want to take that a little bit different in terms of their options. And so we looked at the landscape that was available in both private and public sector procurement and contracting. And we said, well, first of all, we believe that oftentimes certifications are really built on kind of a knowledge, what you know. And yet I've had conversations with people who said, I know people who are certified, I actually would never hire them because they may know the data, the steps, but they don't know how to apply the steps.
Right.
And so that whole issue of being competency-based, developing competency-based education, but also a certification that lends itself to it. At that same time, it's interesting how sometimes the energies meet. We were in conversations with a group called Public Spend Forum. And this actually goes back about 6 months before the board meeting. And what happened at the Public Spend Forum is that they shared with us that they were doing a piece of research for the Volcker Alliance. Their research was just to ascertain what would the competencies be that are needed by individuals that are in public procurement. And their focus at that point was on the federal side. And they had done a lot of research on the federal. He says, but you guys understand the state and local. Are you NIGP interested in helping us go through the research piece? And it's because quite honestly, it's because the Volcker Alliance that came from a position of public trust is essential, public service is essential, but we have got to make sure that when people are in public service, that they have the tools and the competencies in order to be successful.
Great.
And from that was born a certification that was not looking at necessarily at competencies. We were looking at a certification that would address competencies, but also would, we talk about the life cycle in public procurement.
Yes.
This is about the life cycle of the person who is practicing in public procurement. You may very well know how to put an RFP together,
right?
But how do you present your findings in front of your county commissioners or your city manager or your school district superintendent if you don't know how to leverage that leadership skill to support the operations that you've had? So this actually is all born from the certification program, and Pathways is all born from that concept of really wanting to be very intentional about creating a career of choice for individuals that are in public procurement. We hope that more and more of your audience at Radio NIGP are saying, I love public procurement. I want to stay here. I want it to be my career of choice. Now, NIGP, how are you going to help me on those pathways? And that's literally why Pathways is there. We all have different pathways. Some of us we'll land in public procurement for a year and then we want to go do something else. There are other people that's a celebration, by the way. There's other people who say, hey, listen, I was in it. One morning I'm buying bridges, the next day I'm buying asphalt, the next day I'm solving the mayor's car situation. It's an enjoyable job because the variety is so great. So how do we help people in that journey? And that's actually why the certification was built, to think very holistically about what an individual needs to know in order to be successful. So when we were building the certification program, thinking about the member in mind, the person who would want to get certification, we also wanted to make sure that, because we had a blank sheet of paper, this is a vision, right? But we have nothing that's boxing us in like existing framework. So if we really are trying to create a certification that is about competencies and about the development and application of skills, but we also want it to be a certification that stood up to have the rigor and meets the standards for professional certification programs. So as this was being developed, and this is grim, long way of getting to your answer, your question.
Oh, that's perfect.
Is that from a blank sheet of paper, we actually looked at the highest standard you can get in professional certification programs, the ANSI accreditation, and said we want to follow these as guideposts, and hopefully, when we grow up, when we actually have the certification program, and we have enough individuals that have gone through the program, that we can actually apply for this accreditation. And why is that important to us? Because we know in public procurement, we're all about standards.
Absolutely.
Now, I haven't practiced in a while. You helped me, Barb, but when I practiced public procurement, my scopes of work, my regulations, they're all about standards.
Yes.
They would talk about, we would literally put ANSI or ISO or whatever the case may be. So standards are really important. So let's build a certification program for people that are in public procurement who understand standards and want to know that when they go through the rigors, and listen, I know, everyone knows, this is not an easy certification. It's tough.
Yes.
People will not pass. They will be disappointed. It is rigorous. But at the end of the day, if you've achieved it, you've also not only achieved your certification, you've achieved a certification that is recognized by the highest standards in professional certification programs. By the way, NIGP and our colleagues at the National Contract Management Association, NCMA, are the two certification programs that have achieved that standard. We've had great testimonials from a lot of candidates that obtained their certification, including some testimonials from people who out the gate were not successful and said, "Yeah, but this is really important to me," and so I went in and took the test a second time or even a third time. That's really, really good news. I would say that what I've heard from a lot of folks is that by going through having just to prepare for taking the exam, they started to learn things that were absolutely critical to their job, but didn't know that they were critical to their job. Because again, if you think about this modular exam, that second module really focused in on leadership and critical thinking and how do you do internal, external customers, et cetera. These are things that people had not developed their skills on. So what they were able to do is to go back into the literature, take those courses, develop those competencies, so they were prepared on the exam. We make a mistake when we think that an exam is the only game in town, right? It's what we strive for, and then once we get it, we're done. It shouldn't be either one of those. What certification should be is a milepost in our career.
Yes.
That we worked through courses, we developed our skills, and we got to a point where we thought we were comfortable with this certification, or actually, because Pathways is about a credentialing system.
Yeah.
There's a public procurement associate designation that you could get. Maybe that's the first part of your milepost.
Right.
But you never stop learning. And so what we found is that members would, oh gosh, I didn't know this. And I got the certification, but I now feel more confident in my leadership skills because I developed and honed in on those skills that prepared me not only for my exam in June, but also prepared me for my career after June, July is over, from 24 to 25 to 2026. And that's really the mark of a good certification program, is that it is that milepost. It's not an asterisk, but it's a milepost that moves you forward. Yeah. Yeah, and another thing to mention, Barb, is that when we think about the journey, and we want people to stay for that extended period of time, we don't want them to come in for a year and leave, is that we want the certification program to prepare them for today and what they need in the future. And so we wanted to be very, very intentional about thinking of this as an ecosystem. You know, it's a larger offering that NIGP is providing in Pathways. But let me connect that from a member standpoint to the work that we're doing with the Center for the Advancement of Research and Excellence, or CARE. So CARE is our think tank where we have brought together senior practitioners, business leaders, academicians, and association people. These are all stakeholders of the public sector procurement, to come together and say, what is it that we don't know that we do need to know in order to prepare for the next generation? Listen, 2019, when we talked about Pathways, if you had said that we are going to be locked down in a pandemic and we're going to be fighting about masks and gowns and supply chain disruptions, I would have said, are you crazy? That's never going to happen. And there we were. Mm-hmm. So the idea behind CARE is for us to know what we don't know, so that we're better in preparing our members that are public procurement professionals. Now, what does that mean for certification? That means the certification is part of this ecosystem, right? So what happens out of CARE, a new discovery, the piece of research that's commissioned, Now we have, oh, by the way, there was 5 ways to do methods of source selection. We found a 6th one that will be ideal for a certain type of public procurement. And because it's part of the ecosystem, our friends in content develop content for it. It could be another class in Pathways. It could be a workshop at Forum. It could be a global best practice. And watch this, it swims over to certification and it gets embedded in certification as well.
Absolutely.
So it's a very holistic approach to bringing it. That's really valuable to the member, because now the member is dealing with a certification that is constantly updated, constantly relevant to what not I need to know today, but what I need to know in the future.
Well,
yeah, let me just say that this day, where we received the announcement from ANSI, does not belong really to the Institute. It certainly does not belong to me. I would say it belongs to a couple members of the staff that just, I mean, it was morning, noon, and night. Because this, if you think the exam was rigorous, the application process was crazy rigorous in terms of documentation, crossing the ice, making sure we have done everything that's right, that's required in that standard. But the celebration really belongs to those who had the vision to develop a competency-based certification that grew with your profession.
right.
Certainly the NIGP board. I certainly hats off to our own team with Dr. Slater in content and Diane Daly in certification, the NIGP Certification Commission, but the people that were part of the practice analysis that's required, people that came together to write exam questions and review questions. This celebration is for them. And really, ultimately, the celebration is for the 1,500 people who have that designation and now know that that designation is backed up by the highest standard that you can get for professional certification programs. I think that's a celebration. And hopefully that is the impetus for others to join and to say, you know what, I need to get that too, because I want to be a leader in my profession.
Jump in the stream. You'll swim.
It's right.
And you'll have a ball doing it. I know I have.
Yeah.
So Rick, at this moment, we'll just say thank you. And we know you're a frequent contributor to Radio NIGP, and we appreciate that in addition to everything else you do. And we're looking forward to seeing you at the Forum in North Carolina this year.
Yes.
And celebrating some more, correct?
We're going to be celebrating all the new certified procurement professionals as part of the celebration, and it'll be a bunch of them.
Okay.
There are lots of people on stage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Good to see you.
Yes, and you.
Hello and welcome to Radio NIGP. My name is Bobby Tolston, and today we'll take a deeper dive into our topic, Use It or Lose It, the mad rush to year-end spend. I am in the K-12 space, and for those of you that are in K-12s, you understand the importance of utilizing funds that have been distributed to us for whatever purpose that is. So in our agency, we have established what we call the year-end memo. The year-end memo is typically distributed 3 months prior to our fiscal year end, which is June 30th. In that memo, we provide specific dates for actions to be completed by. We usually follow up with our big end users, the ones who are typically late and oftentimes have lots to spend. We also make sure that we publish our memo at the same time each year, and we make sure that all of the departments that are involved in the process are included. That includes our procurement department, that includes accounts payable, that includes payroll, that includes our P-card administrator. It also includes our warehouse where we have products for distribution. We give deadlines and we make sure that those deadlines are realistic, and we make sure that we publish that memo virtually the same time every year to build that consistency. In my opinion, when we lose funds, it impacts our students. So I encourage you not to be a loser. Use your funds. Make sure that you set specific dates, be consistent, and just know that when you lose, your school loses too. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you back here again real soon. Take care.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Allaire, and I'm on staff with Radio NIGP. And today, in Visionary Views, I have with me our very own Keith Glass. Keith is the Procurement and Contracts Manager for the city of Tamarack, Florida. And many of you may know him as a prior board member for NIGP, and you see him every year at Forum. So, Keith, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Linda?
I'm wonderful. But I have a question for you.
All right.
NIGP has a class actually on grants and how to deal with federal grants. And everybody loves free money, right? So
That they
we
do.
chase grants so we can buy stuff or support programs. But from your perspective, are grants kind of the be all and end all that people may think they are, or are there issues with them that we need to recognize early on?
First, I'll say that grants class is a wonderful class and everybody should take it if they haven't. But as to whether or not grants are the greatest thing since the paper napkin, you need to look at each grant separately. And some of the things you really need to do is, if you have a grants person in your organization, you need to be their best friend. You need to take coffee to them every now and then to make them happy, because what you want them to do, what you need them to do, is to share new grant processes or applications with you in advance so that you can read them and find out what the requirements are. Because sometimes the requirements of the grants are so onerous, you may end up spending more money at the end of the day than what you save from being able to utilize the grant towards a particular purchase.
So could you give us an example of that?
Okay. Timelines, first example. Grant timeline may be so short that you don't have enough time to handle it through your statutorily imposed procurement process. That's a real problem. And another problem I found is that there is some very restrictive wording that you oftentimes have to include in grants, which can actually restrict competition. Some of the provisions for, well, here in the States we have for Buy American, for example, could actually end up causing you more grief because you wouldn't be able to find or source the product. We found with some construction grants, as an example, if you would, let's say, have a project that's about $25 million estimated, the grant requires is only for about $600,000 and requires the payment of Davis-Bacon prevailing wages to contractors. Here in Florida, we're in a right to work state, so firms can bid labor rates however they see fit. But if a Davis-Bacon wage requirement is imposed, they have to bid the Davis-Bacon wage. And this $25 million project with a $600,000 grant, as a result of Davis-Bacon, could end up costing $31 million. And that sucked up all the $600,000 grant money and then some. So you actually end up paying more for your project because of the requirements of the grant. So due diligence and carefully looking at the provisions and requirements of the grant are just all too important.
Well, and being able to be proactive with having your grant application person or whatever title you've given them engage with you in advance can really help you suss that stuff out, right? And figure out if your free money is actually free. Because in that example, there was no way your free money was free.
Exactly. And it's very important as procurement professionals to make sure that you do engage with whomever is responsible for receiving grants in your organization.
Very true. So just on that note about the requirements of a grant, I have an example for you as well. And it's outside of construction, so that's why I wanted to mention it. Because there are things that sometimes come up that may not be recognized as being directly relevant to the grant that's being offered. So in one of the positions that I held, I was actually responsible for our fleet, and we qualified for fleet status with dealers. So we were a particular vehicle manufacturer, was one of the big three. All of our vehicles were from them, and we qualified for fleet status because of the number of vehicles we had. So we had the offer of a grant to buy a new van to replace one of our older ones that was about to be decommissioned. But the requirement of the grant was that we buy another manufacturer of vehicle from a specific dealer, because the individual who wanted to provide the money, their son worked there as the salesman, and they were going to get a great price. So the issue was, when we looked at it, not only was the price that they could get more than we would pay with our fleet status, but it meant that when we decommissioned one vehicle, if we took this grant, we would now be losing our fleet status with the manufacturer from the other vehicles that we had. So we would potentially lose a lot in vehicle costs that we would have to assume in replacing the other vehicles eventually. So to your point, we politely said we appreciate the offer, but no thank you. And we did explain why it was an issue, and they understood. They were very gracious about it, because not all of your grantors know the ins and outs of managing fleet or construction costs. They're trying to do a good thing, but they don't realize the impact of some of the conditions that are on. So it's a way of also training some of your folks who donate or provide grants in some of the issues around some of those requirements as well, right?
That's right. And especially with equipment items, there's also another thing you need to consider, is that when you're buying equipment or something of that nature, just because somebody's giving you a grant to buy a vehicle now, you may not have that factored in to your overall fleet operations. And you not only have to look at the cost of purchasing the vehicle, but you need to consider the cost of operating that vehicle over the next few years as well. You really need to look at a total cost of ownership perspective when you're looking at something like that. And free money today may be high cost tomorrow when I can't operate whatever I'm purchasing.
Absolutely. So total cost of ownership may have a completely different perspective of what the value is that you're receiving. So those are great points, Keith. I love the fact that your grant person engages with you before they apply for the grant, because you have some time to figure that stuff out. And there's no point in applying for a grant if it's awarded and then you go, oops. 2020 hindsight is perfect vision, right? So let's be proactive. Think about some of this stuff at the front end and not have to do that. How do we deal with this at the back end?
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope this has been beneficial to our viewers. I'm sure they'll pick up some points from you. And the next time you see Keith at Forum, if you have questions, don't hesitate to stop him and ask those questions, or of any of us at Radio NIGP. Thank you, everyone. This is Linda Allaire and Keith Glatz from Radio NIGP.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Legally Speaking with Radio NIGP. I'm Valerie Scott, and I'm joined with Mike Beavis and Kirk Buffington today as we discuss year-end and some of the finance rules, regulations, and laws that are good to be aware of as procurement professionals. So I'm going to start by asking Kirk, can you tell us what GASB is?
Sure, Valerie, and thanks for having us. Mike and I are both very excited to share a little bit of our experience. Well, GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and their responsibility is to write standards of how transactions should be treated in the financial statements of our agencies. It's similar to GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles for the private sector, but GASB is specifically written for the governmental sector. And these guidelines that they write, they're not regulations, they're not laws, but they are guidelines. And the first thing that folks have to remember is when they treat a transaction, it has to pass the muster of the external auditors. That's the bottom line. GASB implementation can be interpreted differently, very much like statutes, and how attorneys will interpret a statute differently. GASB standards are the same thing. They're interpreted differently and they are implemented differently. But as long as you have your auditors on board with how you are treating a transaction, you should be fine.
Yeah, that's great, Kirk, and it's interesting to me because it's one of those situations where it's not a legal question until it gets extreme, right? It's a generally accepted standards question. What happens if you violate that? Well, you might get zapped by your auditor. If the auditors find things they don't like, you lose your credit rating, and your credit rating then makes it cost more to borrow money, and you don't have as much money to spend. So that's why it's so important, and it's not.
Absolutely.
It's not as strong as a model code, which is a guideline that the ABA enacts. It's not as strong as a uniform code, which is something state legislatures do consistently. And to me, it's wonderfully ambiguous. I've worked in jurisdictions where, having to complete a transaction by the end of the year means you have to have it delivered but not paid yet, or you have to have it shipped but not delivered yet, or you have to have it ordered but not delivered yet, or you just have to have it encumbered. And that's all you need. And they've all been accepted by different auditors and different finance directors. So where we'll frequently say consult your lawyer, in this case it's consult your auditor and your finance director and do what they say you should do, and don't try to solve the puzzle. Let them give you the safe harbor of what the conduct is.
Right. The real concern that agencies have to be aware of is if they treat something on the verge of fraudulently or intentionally fraudulently, the agency becomes the victim of an investigation by the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. And as Mike said, that can really affect your borrowing rating. When you go out to issue bonds to borrow funds for capital projects, your rating drops, you're going to pay a whole lot more for that bond and that borrowing than you would absent that SEC finding. Right. It's a bad day when you walk into your office and your assistant tells you, Kirk, there's somebody here from the SEC.
Yeah. That's like somebody from the IRS. It's the same feeling.
Yeah.
They're from the government, but they're not here to help. And I'll say that some of those, if it's close to fraudulent, can get criminal also.
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen jurisdictions where the most narrow interpretation is applied, and that is it has to have been delivered but not yet paid for. And I've had people consider, I won't say they did it because that would be a bad thing, right? But they at least considered ordering it and processing the payment, knowing the payment wouldn't be made in time and thinking it would be delivered before the payment got made, but not knowing for sure. And that is probably criminal, right? That is probably beyond all those rules. So we have to be careful that the interpretation that's being applied is being applied as it's stated, not being worked around by people.
You're right. And when you think about why do people do this? I mean, I don't believe that people are inherently, want to commit fraud. But there's this perception amongst all of our end users, if they don't spend it, they lose it. So they're constantly doing that dance the last, month 10, month 11 of our fiscal years, trying to either roll the money or spend the money or that kind of thing. And they really need to understand the money isn't lost. Generally, if it's general fund money, it's going to go into a fund balance, and it just needs to be reappropriated. Yes, they may need to make that argument again as to why they need those funds reappropriated, but they don't just lose it. And that's a perception I think we've probably all struggled with every end of fiscal year.
I have dealt consistently with this statement. If I don't spend it, the money disappears. And I'm like, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't vaporize. Nobody teleports it to another planet. It's still there. It just moves to, you called it fund balance,
Fund
right?
balance.
It just moves to fund balance. What disappears is your rationalization of why you needed it. And it disappears because you didn't use it.
That's-
So if you didn't use it, you didn't need it. That's kind of an automatic conclusion,
exactly.
right?
You come to me, a department head comes to me and says, I absolutely need to roll these funds. Well, hello, it's month 11 and you've only spent 50% to start with.
Right.
What's the big issue? You obviously
Well,
didn't need all of this year. So it's that perception. And as the old saying goes, perception is reality for people.
right, right. Yeah, and the money does disappear from their account.
Yeah.
Right. So and and so what process do you have to follow? So it goes to fund balance, then what happens?
Well, then through the budgetary process and the appropriation process, the funds can be then reapplied back into that same line item because most of us are line item budgeting. So
Right.
it can be applied right back into the same line item, or it may not get applied at all. There's always a balance of resources.
Right.
That
Right.
we all
Something new
operate with
came up.
limited resources.
You have
And
to pay for the
priorities.
snowstorm or the
Yeah,
hurricane or
the
whatever
hurricane.
happened, and now your money for that new furniture is paying for that, you know? Yeah, it's yeah, I've seen some people call it a reappropriation or supplemental appropriation or something, right? But
Right.
it's a process that happens every year. The question is, what do you have to do with your chief executive to get
To get it back.
this money back on your piece of that appropriation, right?
Right.
And then it requires explaining why you didn't do your job or why you didn't
Why
get
you
all of
didn't-
it done.
Right. Why did
And-
you need so much?
Yeah. And that's okay if the answer is because you had me doing these other things instead. That's usually what the answer is, right?
Change my priorities, halfway
Yeah.
through the fiscal year.
Yeah, you shifted my priorities, so I focused on the new ones, got those done, and this one lagged. And so I need the money to carry it to next year. That's a good argument.
It's a
You
very
know,
good argument.
might not win, but it's a good argument.
And say it with a straight face.
Yeah. So Valerie, in places you've worked, how has it worked for you?
So I've seen the use it or lose it mentality in a previous agency where you get to that last month of your fiscal year and it's just like you have to go to the controller and do all these other things if you want any chance of moving that forward because you didn't get it spent. Then where I am currently, it's more of a just make sure it's encumbered, make sure it's on the PO, and we'll get it on the carry forward appropriation.
Yep. And that's fine if it's that carry forward appropriation, right? That's another name you can give it, right? That's the process, right?
Sure.
And it's interesting. You guys know this. You've been in the world long enough to see it. There's this old political science theory about the budgetary process being the way that the public engages in the priority setting of the organization. That's why you have budget hearings and all those things. And that's what they do with that reappropriation or that carry forward. There's a moment where it's a public hearing and it gets approved as a continuing issue. And if the public wants to object, they could.
It's the same thing at the federal government level.
Yep.
Every year we go through that exercise. They go through that exercise of reappropriation.
Some years better than others.
Yeah, well, so true.
Some years they actually get it done.
Yeah. On a timely basis.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So that's great. Anything else you guys want to add?
I think we've covered a fair amount.
Yeah, I appreciate your all's insight and all of your experience and sharing that with our audience.
Absolutely. It's parting words. Check with your finance director and your auditor and make sure you're doing what they expect you to do. And if somebody says I can't, then send them to those people, right? It's not our rule, it's their rule. I think it's sometimes helpful to explain you could be in a jurisdiction where it was a lot tougher than this, the fact that you just have to encumber it is pretty easy
It's pretty
compared.
loosey-goosey, actually.
Is pretty easy
It's pretty
compared.
loosey-goosey, actually.
Yeah, to compare to you have to have it delivered and just not paid yet, So, well, I'll take it, Valerie. Thank you so much, and Kirk, thank you. And
Absolutely.
this
Great
is
being
Mike
here.
Beavis saying thank you for being here, and thank you to our listeners. And we'll see you next time on Legally Speaking. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm with George today. George, tell me, when you have that time of year, end of the fiscal year, have you had any great stories that you can talk about?
Every year seems like it's a great story, and that's really because all the departments want to spend their money. They just want to go ahead and see everything that they can get in, and what they do is they say, hey, this is how much I have left in my budget. I want to get this, I want to get that, I want to put this service out. So most of my stories, like the end of the year, fiscal year, is that we're inundated with so many projects. So I don't know if that's like one particular story, but it seems like inevitably it always happens.
So many projects you can't even come up with one because there are just too many of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. There are a lot of stories in the city. Well, thank you, George.
No problem. Pleasure.
Hello and good afternoon. This is Kirk Buffington with RadioNIGP, and today I have the pleasure of once again speaking with Shanda Taylor Carpenter from our NIGP headquarters, who is our Director of Content Research and Development. And today we are talking about a couple of things. First and foremost, NIGP's new concierge service that enables our members to look at a 12-month long course preparation and prepare their budget and really have their whole 12 months laid out in front of them to reach the goals in which they're attending to get to. So, Shanda, welcome. What do you have to tell us?
Yes, NIGP is thrilled to unveil the annual NIGP Professional Development Calendar. This comprehensive 12-week schedule is designed to support lifelong learning and professional growth, offering a virtual instructor-led foundation, advanced practitioner, and management pathways courses. Additionally, we have a variety of leadership courses and events, engaging learning labs, and our annual virtual conference focused on new procurement practitioners.
Well, that is great. And how can this concierge program really enable the members to get that schedule on the paper and have it set for them to reach their goals?
Yeah, the calendar really empowers procurement professionals to strategically plan their career development at every age, whether they're newcomers, mid-career professionals, or emerging leaders. Some of the highlights include our new 2-day Introduction to Public Procurement course and the Mastermind program, which provides an in-depth exploration of leadership concepts through peer-to-peer learning environments. This fall, we are also introducing the Deeper Dive into Procurement with Federal Funds Learning Lab series. To help professionals navigate their careers, NIGP offers a complimentary concierge program where individual procurement professionals and entities can meet with our public procurement experts to create a customized professional development plan tailored to their career goals.
That sounds exciting. And the deeper dives, I'm doing the learning labs for bonds and risk management. And I think that's such a great opportunity to get a deeper look into some of these subjects that we cover, but spend more time on them. So I think that's great that you're continuing to do that. And I think the federal grants is, a great topic to have one for. So I've heard there's a discount. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so NIGP members can take advantage of our 60-20 rule, allowing them to register for any in-person or virtual class 60 days prior to the start date and receive an additional 20% discount.
Great. Well, that is absolutely super. Anything else you'd like to share?
I'd just like you to join us on this exciting journey of professional development and make the most of the opportunities available through the NIGP Professional Development Calendar.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Shanda. And this is Kirk Buffington, remote from the FAPO conference in Orlando, Florida. Have a great afternoon. And this is Radio NIGP.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, question for you
Alrighty.
is, what advice would you give for people as they're coming into year end?
Planning can never start too soon. I know we were at my agency that we start in August and we do a big meeting to gear everybody up. Of course, the end of the fiscal year is in September, but we want to get out those important dates ahead of time and make sure expectations are set. So it never hurts to plan, and you can never start too soon.
Hello and welcome to Way to Grow, an NIGP mentorship moment. Today, we're at the Florida Association of Public Procurement Officials conference in Orlando, Florida. And I'm honored to have someone I talked to a year ago, Heidi Hubbard. And Heidi, a year ago, we talked about your entry into the mentorship program. It's 1 year later. I'd like to follow up on our interview last year. How are things going now? Tell us a little bit about how you've grown over the last year.
I have to say, the last year has been fantastic. A lot has been going on, and I think all of the great things that have come about in this last year, a big part of it has to go to my experience in mentorship. I was able to connect with people that were willing to share and support and encourage me. I've acquired my designation, my PPA designation. I've been able to head special projects at work, so all the information that I've been able to collect and learn from everyone and my peers has helped me perform my job more effectively. Creating valuable relationships with everyone is going to be going a long way, and it continues. And I've been able to help people throughout this process as well without even trying. I didn't sign up to be a mentor. And I find myself being able to help others just the way I was able to be helped. So it's been a great year. Just love it.
It has been, and you've even told us what's coming up next year. That's great.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. And I want to thank you today for following up with us and letting us know and letting everybody else know that the program is really a great program. So if you're interested, remember, we're at www.nigp.org/mentorship. Go in and check it out. And you too can be like Heidi. So this
it's awesome. Do it, guys. Totally enjoyed it.
So this is Keith Glatz, thanking you and asking you to join me again next time for Way to Grow, and reminding you that this is Radio NIGP.
Friends, it has been a great discussion in May and June about what do we do with end of the year funds, and are we really supposed to be spending that money? If so, how do we know, right? I'm doing too much. I know it. Being a little dramatic. Here's the thing. As procurement officers, a lot of times we like things in boxes, nice and neat, right? And so I like to have my purchases made by June 30th, cleared up, especially with those P cards, so that I know what happened last year and I know what happened next year. But it doesn't always happen that way. So what do we do as procurement officers to make sure we can be as neat and as clean as possible? One of the things that I think, or that I offer to you, is that we start communicating not in June, but in July. These are our expectations for next year. And also find out the expectations of your end users for the next year. I just had this conversation with our president. If you could please discuss with cabinet what they want from me next year, then I can plan accordingly. And so nothing blindsides me, even at the last minute. And the question is, should we be spending this money in June for something that we know, right, is not going to be used until the next fiscal year? Well, I don't think it's cut and dry. I think Charlie gave us a very good example of why we may want to make the big purchase at the end of the year with his example of the golf balls. Also, I know from my time in education that anything can happen in the summertime, whether your fiscal year ends in the summertime or not. So think about this. You have kids in camps. They need supplies. If you're in K-12, there's always the discussion about teachers needing supplies for the classroom and teachers spending their money for supplies for the classroom. So I tell you that if a secretary at the end of the year finds $800 to buy crayons for the students to use the next year, I think that's a responsible purchase, and I'm not stopping it. It really depends on the purchase. And it depends on the culture and the needs of your agency. So while we all offered some really great advice, my closing advice to you is to take a good look at what the need is for each and every purchase, and don't give blanket answers of yes and no. Because at the end of the day, it's always our job to be gatekeepers and to be good stewards of public resources. Thank you. I am so excited to be here with three of my favorite procurement heroes, Mr. Don Buffum. He's underneath me. Mr. Carl Benito, and then Mr. Sean Carroll. I have to do all the dramatics because I'm excited. In any case, we're here. I'm here just because I wanted to sit down with the three people who came before me as chair people of the NIGP CPP Certification Commission. Now that I've taken on that role, these gentlemen have been so supporting of me. And so I just want to take this moment not only to say thank you, but just to hear about what they think has been going on with the certification. So Don, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Oh, great. Well, I know it started before me, before I got on the certification. I know there were lots of people working hard to figure out what the best pathway was for the Institute and for certification. And the board at the time made a very strong and powerful decision to work towards a new certification. And so they appointed myself, and actually the three of you were all on the original certification commission. And we were assigned the task of coming up with a plan, coming up with a certification that would take in, well, first one needed to be competency based, which we dearly needed. And it needed to include things like leadership, negotiation, business principles, things that we all did every day, but weren't part of anything prior to that. So we got that assignment. We worked hard. We came up with a lot of good ideas. We had two people, staff members, Ms. Ropes and Ms. Diane Daly, that helped us tremendously, because each time we came up with an idea of how we wanted to do something or what we wanted to do, they'd look at it and say, okay, that's not best practice, or that's not going to lead you where you really want to go. And where we wanted to go was a certification that was based on best practices, but also was capable of moving forward towards a ANSI certification. And so everything we did in that first year was set up so that it could build on the future. And we created a certification program. We had a lot of discussion. It was fantastic. And just to work with the three of you, as well as all the other people that were on that commission, on something that was brand new, it was amazing for me. It was kind of one of those career things, and I just loved it, every minute of it.
So, as Don said, we started from scratch. Like, we built everything from the ground up. And I was honored to be with these great gentlemen. Don was our first chairperson. So we moved on to Carl. So Carl, as a second chairperson of the commission, you had the great experience of leading with Don and with Sean, Don to build and with Sean to carry on the sustainability. What's your perspective now?
Yeah, I had the honor to be on there with Don and Sean and yourself and learn a lot from Don when we started it from scratch. That was a lot of legwork that we all put in to build, all the policies and things that we see today with ANSI certification in mind, right? We built it with the best practices, as Don said, with great help from Diane and also Logan, right, in the at the institute. So those things that when I was passed on the baton from Don, it was really building it to the next stage, and engaging with the members of those that were newly certified and increasing our members and everybody else to get certified, and seeing it grow is just amazing. As we've seen the numbers just increase every testing period, and at forum engaging with members, asking about it, excited about it. It was really truly something that that made me feel really proud to be part of. And as we progressed as years, we started looking at the next steps. Sean and I, and when we met and discussed on numerous occasions about where we're going to go, right, and what the next steps could lead to, and which led to the leadership of Sean taking on that, to then looking at the next few years and how we would mold that. So when we met together back, I think last fall, we all sat the minds together and looked at and envisioned where we were going to be in the next, I think it was 3 years, and started really molding that together to build off what Don had brought through and what the group had brought through, and myself, and then build that roadmap for future. All at the same time, the application was being filled in. It was a lot of work that I know of, and I'll let you talk about that later. But it was a long process. It started, in the stages all the way back from Don, and really the application then came into effect when I was there, but it continued. So we all have a little bit of a touch on it, which is really important for where we are today, which is something that we probably all look back at and go, wow, every time I hear the certification, I'm thinking, wow. So yeah, that's kind of my take on where we were with development and bringing it to slowly, bringing all the new policies and procedures in place, and learning from all the best practices, and making ours shine, being a world-class certification.
So I was actually in the first class that got certified. And I can remember when I tested, I walked out ready to cry, thinking, how am I going to explain to people that I did not pass this test? So I'm very proud of the fact that I was in the first class, because it was a bear, not only to test, but remember, it was during the pandemic and all the testing centers had closed. So I had to drive to a whole nother state to even test. So to see us go from the very first person to now, the number that we have, what is it, Sean? It's well over 1,000, right? In 4 years?
Yeah, coming up on 1,200.
Yeah, in 4 years, to me, it's amazing. And considering that we lost the first group because the world shut down, yeah, it's amazing to me. So now, Sean, following Carl, you led the efforts to develop a strategic plan, to address the future of this certification. What would you like to see happen in the next 3 years?
Sure. So, first, you don't always get to plant an oak tree with people that are as great as the folks on this group, right? Don plants the seed, he nurtures it, he gets us ready to grow. Carl lays down roots and builds strength, and I get the privilege of coming in, at the right moment to hopefully create the shade that the next generation of procurement people will sit under for that oak tree. So the strategic plan was really about who are we going to be, right? So we started a certification because we knew what the profession needed. Now the certification needs to be resilient and sustainable and continue to meet the needs of a changing profession. And that's what the strategic plan really did. And all of these folks were on that group, and a huge number of people made investments in that. One of the outcomes of the strategic plan was we want this to be the premier certification in the profession. And one of the ways you do that is you put it through the rigor of third-party validation. So the opportunity to put the ANSI application in, and kudos to staff for all of the work that went into that, so much more than even the commission, right? But the ability to say that this is one of the only certifications in this profession that can live to this exemplary standard, right? This certification is not good, it is not great, it is rarefied, because it has been third party validated by the hardest set of standards that's out there. And that's what the investment was. And my hope now is that all of the folks who are thinking about being certified recognize the value of going through that rigor, and the value of knowing that we've had a third party say, yes, this was fair. Yes, it was on point. Yes, it absolutely is the world class certification. And I just couldn't be more proud of the fact that we got to put together a plan for 3 more years to sustain all of the work that's been going on for the last 4.5. So I really appreciate you guys nurturing the seeds of this, giving it roots and strength. And now, Stacy, the ability to hand it to you and see you give it flight. I can't be more proud of this team and more proud of what it's accomplished so far.
I feel the same way. I absolutely feel the same way. And again, it's my honor to even be able to sit here and have a conversation with you all and say that I am chair of that group that you all have already led. You created a great example for me and for everybody who comes behind me. So now, Sean, you started ringing the bell just to discuss that we are ANSI certified. That's a big deal for us. While we're talking about it, I do want to say that our staff, Ms. Diane Daly and Logan, both put in so many hours to get us to that point. I wanted to give you each, because I know you each, if I'm working closely with Diane, you each work probably more closely. I wanted to give you each a minute to kind of give your perspective, ring the bell, congratulate her on her work, because she's done a lot for us.
There's no question. Diane, well, I don't know how the others feel, but she was the right hand, throughout that first year that I was the chair. Is every time I had a question or every time we had discussions about anything, I could go to her. And if she didn't know the answer right off, she knew where to go to get it, which is the key to, knowledge, is knowing where to find it. And she was just tremendous. She's a little quirky at times, but I love her for it,
I think my thing with Diane is her willingness to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And to say you sound ridiculous without saying you sound ridiculous, right? So that we don't run ourselves into a trail that's going to lead us to nowhere or lead us to trouble. And I interrupt you, Carl. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to add to what Don had said, and working with Diane would guide us in the direction where we wanted to go with her expertise and background and certifications and benchmarking. You'd be able to ask her a question, and she'd be able to benchmark with another certification on best practices and give you the answer almost instantaneously, and tell you what the market trends were and that type of stuff, which really helped us kind of move forward with many of the questions and concerns that we had as we went along. And like Dawn said, she would find the answer if she didn't have it, but more importantly, she had that experience to bring forward to the Institute when we were going to keep the train moving. It was moving good, and it was moving great because of some of the experiences that she had in the past. So we were able to accomplish a lot together and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, for us, starting a new certification was an act of faith, right? It was I think for most of us, it was our first soup to nuts certification development, right from the beginning. Diane brought decades of experience to that process. And then even for her, the work and the level of scrutiny of ANSI certification was dramatic, right? She's run certifications of all different kinds. And this was the highest standard any of those certifications ever had to live to. So to see those 3 decades of experience still be impressed and see the value of ANSI certification that was the great part for me. It was less great watching Diane have to go through it, because it was it was a labor of Hercules to get it done. But to see somebody who is a certification professional and well regarded that way and that experienced still be both daunted and impressed by the process, that tells me everything I need to know about the value of ANSI certification.
Absolutely. So now we're going to wrap it on up. Any final words, Don?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, the board made some great decisions. The staff, Diane did some great things. The commission did some great things. But when I go back to the beginning, when I go back to where things start, it's an idea. And I've got to give credit to Rick Grimm. Rick was watching other certifications across the human resources certification, others. He was watching to see what was working and what was really progressing and making true professionals. And it was his knowledge and ideas and discussions with board members and others that ultimately led us, to get started. Sean, I appreciate me saying I planted the seed, but I think Rick Grimm is the one that really deserves a lot of credit for not only this, but everything NIGP is and has been.
Okay, Carl, final words?
I just really, want to say that where we are today with the third-party ANSI certification, it puts that much more power behind what we already kind of knew, right? I mean, we knew this. We now we have the verification to say so, and to prove what we've done now is, like Sean had said, the gold standard or leading certification, with that verification, and I think that's really important, and it speaks volumes that it's something that public procurement professionals can aspire to get and obtain, and know that it's put through by built by members, right? Built by professionals, and that it's definitely something to walk proud with.
Sean?
Sure. So I think building the certification was a tough road. Getting the certification validated by ANSI was a tough road. And for folks who've taken the certification, even the certification, it's an investment, right? It's a tough road. And all of those things are tough because they're worth it. They're tough because they are the right thing to do. And the reality is that certification is there because we believe in everybody who's listening to this. We believe in the education they're going through and the professional development. And we believe that the certification is one of those big steps forward in validating the hard work they've done. So we hope everybody will see that the certification is really out of belief in their skill set. And hopefully people continue to invest in the certification and see that it continues to be worth it.
So you took the words out of my mouth, because I know I mentioned earlier how difficult this exam was, but if it wasn't, it would have no value. And so with that, I want to encourage any of you who are watching this segment to go out there and test and pursue this certification, because it is valuable. And I want to take the time to thank everyone who's already done it. Whether or not you've passed it and you've achieved the credential, thank you for believing enough in the credential to take the steps to do it. And to all of you all who put that NIGP CPP behind your names and put those badges on your emails, thank you for keeping this alive. And we certainly plan bigger and better for this certification as we move through the next 3 years. Thank you all, gentlemen, for everything that you've done for the certification so far and for taking the time to join me today. I appreciate each of you.
Thank you.